What are the boundaries that you both dream of pushing? What is the uncharted territory here where you still have to pull back a little bit?
I have to say that Boardwalk Empire is extraordinary, and my wishful thinking is I wish I could come up with shows that were as good as that. So I just think that's the benchmark. I'm not just saying that to blow smoke.
Well,
I really
you did
think,
come up with a terrific show. I mean, obviously.
that's why they win the award.
Thank you.
You know. So when you pitched Boardwalk, you pitched it. You didn't write the pilot in advance.
Didn't they come
Yeah,
to you?
well, they gave me a book called Boardwalk Empire, which is essentially the history of Atlantic City.
I know that book. It's a
and
great
they said,
book.
look, go read it and see if you think there's a series in there. And I initially came back to them. I said, there's 3 areas I'm interested in, 3 time periods. One was the 1920s, one was the 50s, one was the 70s. And then I said, all right, well, the 70s feels too much like The Sopranos. You know, it's basically going to be organized crime in New Jersey. The 50s feels like, I don't know, I've seen it a lot. You know, the Rat Pack stuff is a great era, but I feel it's familiar. The 20s is the thing I'm interested in because Prohibition hasn't really been done in TV for a long time, or at all. It was The Untouchables was in 1960 with Robert Stack. There's a brief syndicated version of that in the 80s, but that didn't really, it wasn't very popular. And it had this incredible protagonist, this guy Nucky Johnson, who was the head of this corrupt politician who was veering into gangsterism right when Prohibition happened. And also just the historical backdrop was too good to be true. World War I just ended. Women just got the right to vote. The world was just changing so rapidly. It was the beginning of the 20s, which was this incredible decade. And so then I was able to say, okay, and then start there. And then this was really the beginning. Prohibition was the single event that made organized crime possible. That's what made millionaires out of gangsters overnight. And this is the dawn of organized crime in America, and seen through the eyes of this guy. And it just sort of, we could take it all the way through Prohibition. We could take it through the 1920s. And, it just sort of laid out very neatly as a series. So it sort of fit the template I just described.
And at what point did you come up with the set, that green screen?
Well, that was the thing I thought that was going to kill the show before it started, because then once I decided, okay, this is what it is, we have a show called Boardwalk Empire, we have to see the boardwalk. And then when I started to do the research and looked at what the Atlantic City boardwalk looked like in 1920, I realized there's no way we could do this. It doesn't exist anymore. They knocked down all those buildings. Even if we went there, we couldn't shoot it. So we had to create this thing. So I said, we're doomed. There's no way we can afford to do this. I handed the pilot in. I gave the HBO 15 pages of photographs of the Atlantic City boardwalk. And I said, when I say the boardwalk, just so you know, this is what I'm talking about. So I said, this is going to end up being, a really fun writing sample. And then HBO had been running John Adams, the miniseries at the time. So much of what you were seeing wasn't real. Boston, circa 1775, appears on the horizon behind Paul Giamatti, and suddenly it's there. And I think, this is it. We can, if we build a big enough chunk of boardwalk, we'll just extend it with digital. And that's what you see on TV. There's no ocean in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, as you well know, but there is now, because that's where a boardwalk set is.
Do you ever feel pressure to do what the audience wants you to do?
No.
To satisfy people?
I'm an asshole. And I have an authority figure problem, which goes back to my youth. And so, like, I had nuns, for 12 years in the same school. And when they would say, like, don't open that door, I'm opening the door. I'm like, as soon as she turns her back.
Right.
So I want to do the opposite because that's the way I'm wired. Mm-hmm. But no, as a matter of fact, we used his, Sopranos. Mm-hmm. Because I was such a fan of it. Peter was a fan of it. Evan Riley, who was our third writer and third wheel on Rescue Me, was a huge fan of it, and actually worked on the show briefly before we started Rescue Me. Mm-hmm. So we looked at Tony, and Tony, Tony was a difficult guy.
What was it like in the writer's room? Because you were really pioneers in many respects with The Sopranos. So were you just looking around at each other thinking, like, shit, can we really do this?
Or I would pitch things in the writer's room thinking, all right, there's no way this is ever going to happen, and then we would do it. In season 3, we did an episode where we juxtaposed the problems of Tony's daughter, who was away at Columbia, having problems with her roommate. She, this rich suburban kid, juxtaposed against a 19-year-old stripper in New Jersey who was having real problems because her boyfriend was played by Joe Pantoliano. That wasn't the problem. The problem was his character. And we wanted to do this exploration of these 2 young women with very different problems. So we needed to come up with a situation that was something horrific happened to Meadow. And she sees something on the street. David was just going, something she sees that's disturbing. And I said, well, I got something that was disturbing. I was on the subway a month ago, and there was a homeless woman with a trash bag, a big hefty bag wrapped around her waist as a skirt. And she got up to get her bags to get off. The skirt fell off, and she had newspaper crumpled up the crack of her ass. And I said, that was kind of disturbing. And he said, great, let's do that. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And we did it. And not only did we do it, but I'm pretty sure we used the New York Post, which I think at the time had given us a bad review. And we were very specific to make sure that that was the thing. But I mean, stuff like that, that's a very minor and crude example. But it was, the type of things, you can really just say, okay, you want real? How about this for reality?
Dennis, you had a rape episode on Rescue Me.
Yeah.
It wasn't a
How
rape.
did that go?
It wasn't. That's not how we looked at it. We looked at it in the violence of that relationship between Janet and Tommy. That moment was a moment when everything sort of came to bear. And by the way, one of the things that got lost in the controversy about that was what the brilliant performance Andrea Roth gave in that scene. But we stole everything from the lives of people that we knew. And it was my doing, that scene. It was my idea. And it was based on a divorce and a separation that a couple of people I knew were going through, and an event that happened in that relationship, which my friend in the relationship was the woman, and she told me about it. And I thought that was a really unbelievable thing for Tommy and Janet's relationship. And of course, we were criticized in the press up and down by people who never saw the episode,
of course,
who just heard that there was a rape involved. What most people would call a rape, which looks like it's forcible, and which ends up becoming this moment when these two people are making love, which is what happens in the scene.
Right.
And the reaction to it, of course, was like a firestorm. But the truth of the scene and the truth of the relationship was still there. Was at the center of the scene.
I keep hearing you talk about stealing people's lives, stealing stories from people's lives. Is everybody just hunky-dory with this? The woman who is...
No.
What are some of the reactions you get?
Some people, if you're a writer and you want to write what you know, some people are proud of it, and some people want to go, hey, that's me, and some people are like, I'm not talking to you again. And even in the
How about the woman with the sex scene, the non-rape scene?
Boy, I can really convolute this story for you, but it's the truth. She gave me that story. Mm-hmm. The woman, the fictional, the guy that I just told you about, whose life I was using the marriage for Tommy Gavin from, his real life ex-wife ended up being an actress on the show years later. Wow. Because she's a brilliant actress and she fit this part. So your head starts to spin, and then you get fired. We have real firefighters on the set who come into work and go, last night, like there was a famous episode of Rescue Me where guys were measuring their dicks. It was a dick measuring contest. The way that happened was we went to work one day on another episode, and we had breakfast. You have the breakfast from the truck when you go to the set in the morning. We're having breakfast, and these two guys were literally over here next to me and Peter, and two firefighters. And they were going like, he cheated, man. I'm telling you, he cheated. He measured from the wrong spot, and he's counting. And we're listening to him and going like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, we're having a cock measuring thing at the firehouse, and this one guy cheated. And we were like, clink, And I said, I'm writing this down. They said, well, you should write it down because he's cheating. I said, all right. So, so we would also sometimes go to neighborhoods to shoot fires. And guys from the local firehouse come out and go like, I was the guy in that contest, man. I didn't think it was funny. I was like, well, sorry.
That's great. Awesome.
I just think that the best stories come from real life anyways. And certainly when you're dealing with drama and comedy, that's true. And sometimes you just have to accept that people are going to be pissed.
Yeah, sometimes you do it inadvertently too. It's your life. You remember things. I don't entirely remember where I heard things and who said what to who. And then sometimes you think people are going to like it or be amused, and they're not. I've gotten into trouble a couple of times, just being too honest. And I happen to be a writer, so I've gotten into trouble using actual names of people that I thought would be fun, and
Oh, boy.
not fun.
Dennis, you said something earlier that I thought was interesting about finding the comedy in these firefighters, the black comedy. You guys have created these shows that require so much of actors, so much of writers. How has that changed what happens in the writing room? How has it changed the craft of acting?
The biggest laughs I've ever had in life have been in the most dramatic situations. I mean, for me, the funniest thing is taking two guys who are angry and under pressure and putting them in a car together. And you've been there in your own life, you know? I mean, that's the shit that is so funny. And it's real. I mean, and especially, I mean, a firehouse. I mean, those guys are all, there's no way to do that job without being a ball breaker or a cop, or and especially anything on the East Coast. I mean, it's all just ball breaking from start to finish. And for me, that's comedy. It's not sitcom stuff set up in punchline. It's people in real situations under pressure, and it's just being honest. I mean, that's where the best comedy comes from.
That famous episode of The Sopranos where they were out in the woods.
Oh, the Pine
Oh
Barrens,
my
yeah,
God.
that was absolutely, yeah.
Hilarious,
I mean,
that
those
episode.
two guys want to kill each other.
I
Yeah,
know.
that could have been a comedy, and it really is real. I mean, it's just that wasn't. We weren't really trying to be funny. It was just that situation. Guys start turning on each other. It's gonna get funny.
That episode was really funny, man.
Thank you.
Really funny.
Thank you.
How do you guys write female characters, and how do you write complex female characters? Especially, let's take you, Dennis, with a writing staff of 3 dark
Yeah,
dudes.
3 guys.
Yeah.
You listen, I got to tell you, honestly, you know, and we were blessed in the case of our lead actresses. You know, they were not only were they good, but they were given permission, and because we asked them, like, listen, just tell us what works, what doesn't work for you. You take the words and rearrange them. So that's extremely handy, you know.
Did you allow male actors to do the same
Same thing. And as a matter of fact, I mean, I don't know how you guys did it, but for us sometimes, with certain actors, especially like when they're together, or you know, in Rescue Me, I guess it would be the firehouse, that group of guys in the firehouse. Like, you could say, like, guys, this is what we have, and we think this is good, we need that piece of information, this joke's pretty good, that joke's good, but everything else is up for grabs. And the guys would start improvising around it, and, you know, after a couple of takes, usually you'd go, this is way better than what we wrote.
Right.
And in the case of, on our show, Callie Thorne and Andrea Roth, and even the girls who played my daughters, as they got older, as the show went on, they would go like, you know, I have a better idea than this, and you know, I think I would say this, and maybe I'll try that, and it would generally be better. And I just think because it was 3 guys in this room, that worked better for us, and it saved our asses. But also, more importantly, they were in charge of their characters to a point where what they ended up doing with it was so much better than what we could have done.
Terrence, what does your writer's room look like, and how do you write female characters?
What it looks like physically is a windowless room in the interior of Starner Studios. I just went to the doctor for a checkup, and she said, your vitamin D level is so unbelievably low. I mean, we literally write in a room without windows. What it looks like in terms of the makeup of the writing staff is, you know, we have a writing team, a husband and wife writing team, me and 3 other guys, and a associate producer who's a female, who's our writer's assistant producer. In terms of writing women, you know, it's, you know, I've never killed anybody, but I've written murderers. I'm not a woman, but you write women. You just, whatever the character is, you just sort of try to go there as a writer and imagine what it must be like to be an Irish immigrant widow in 1920, and what might she say. And I've had women say, no. Actually, that's not what she might say. You know, I'm lucky enough to be married to a woman who's really savvy in terms of storytelling and script writing, and get notes from her. You know, I mean, I don't think they're, you know, it's not like, you know, I think early on in my career, when I tried to write women, I would try to girly it up a little bit. I could try to think, like, how would a girl say, and this is just ridiculous. Just say, just make believe it's a guy, and at the last minute slug in the girl's name, and generally 90% of the time it's the same dialogue.
It's like that great quote from Jack Nicholson.
I
in
was
As
not
Good
going
as
to
It
mention
Gets.
that, but you can say it.
What was the quote?
It's a woman
How do you write women
runs up and
characters?
says, "How do you write women so well?" And he says, "You imagine a man and then take away all reason and accountability."
Jack Nicholson said that?
Well, no,
His character in the
in-
movie.
Oh.
In the movie.